The darkness that fell upon La Muerte del Cielo. I was going to die. I've never been more certain of anything else in my life. As I looked out onto the moonlit water, eyes wide with shock and tears, I felt such an utter hopelessness in my soul. There was no trace of a boat in the distance, no sign of a storm that had ripped it apart. All of it was gone now, leaving only me on a desolate beach. In the back of my mind, I wondered if anyone else had survived. Our photographer, Kevin, had been in excellent shape and told us he knew these waters well. But if he'd survived the storm, I hadn't seen any trace of him or our little yacht's modest crew. The only one I'd seen was Laura, one of the other models. She lay dead, a short distance down the beach. A mirror-like servant of the ocean waxed and waned, daring itself closer to me. The salt water covered my feet, and my own tears fell down to join the ocean. The air was surprisingly cold, and for a moment I wished that it had been anything but swimwear shoot, so at least I had something to keep me warm. You were only supposed to be out for a few hours, get some pictures and go back. Kevin had said he knew a beautiful untouched island that would look great in the background shots. I never expected I'd die here. I stood up, taking one last look at infinity spanning out before me, before I turned to see what awaited me on the island. Lush, thick greenery, but silence otherwise. I wondered what was hidden inside the veil of vegetation. Food? Fresh water? Or just my death? Even though I knew there was nothing left for me on the beach, I was afraid to leave it. Sitting there and feeling miserable wasn't going to save me. But what if some survivors arrived? I'd been thinking about survivors for almost an hour by that point. Even if it was unlikely, I still had some hope. Besides, I was so tired, and the idea of wandering around alone in those trees when I was worn out and unprepared seemed like a bad idea. With no other options, I went down the beach, looking for the beaten up yellow dinghy I had arrived in. I had to pass Laura's body to get there, and tried not to gag when I saw crabs picking at her. God, I didn't want to think about that. The dinghy was in terrible shape, but it was a shelter. I hauled it away from the water and closer to the land before dropping it hopelessly on the ground again. I hadn't gotten very far, but it would have to do. It wasn't much for shelter, but it was better than nothing. The night before, I slept in a beautiful hotel room in Playa del Carmen. Soft sheets, a warm shower. This was as big of a downgrade as I could possibly get, but I was thankful for it. Waking up surrounded by a dull yellow, it took me a while to remember everything. My body ached, my head was pounding. It was like a bad hangover. I moved to lift the yellow cover of myself when I saw movement. It was just a fleeting glimpse of something, barely a shadow moving away from me. I heard his feet on the sand, running away from me at top speed as I froze. What the hell had that been? An animal? Was someone else there? Either way, it was gone by the time I'd gotten out of the dinghy. There were paw prints on the sand. Headed towards the tree line, my heart sank, wondering if it was a coyote or something. Had it been sniffling at me, hoping I was dead? I tried not to think about it, and took a walk down the beach. The landscape had changed a bit. Laura was still there, and the sink of death had started to sink in. I gave her a white bath. I felt guilty for it. Pieces of the boat had washed ashore, and a bit further down, I saw Kevin laying on the beach. I stopped, hoping that maybe he would move. He didn't. He just lay there, as dead as Laura was. I retched and tried not to vomit, easily considering that I hadn't eaten since lunch yesterday. Hunger was already setting in. I made myself to get closer to him and examine his body. Maybe he had something. A snack or even a gun I saw him keep on his belt. Just in case anyone gives us trouble, he assured us. And I trusted him. His body stank, and I held my breaths as I rolled over and searched him. The gun was still there, with a full clip, 12 bullets. That was good. If anything came after me, I could protect myself. He also had a utility knife that I stole. After some hesitation, I also took his button-down tie-dye shirt and his shoes. It was better than just bare skin and a bikini under the sun. It felt wrong, robbing a dead man. But that was just the thing. He was dead, and I wasn't. Maybe someone had noticed we were missing. Maybe they'd come look for us. And if they did, I could signal them with the gun. As I finished my act of grave robbing, I heard sniffling behind me. I turned around, hand reaching for the gun before pausing. I found another survivor, it seemed. Kevin had told me the husky's name was Black. He'd been asleep on the yacht, and had seemed friendly enough. I hadn't seen him since, before the photo shoot, but here he was now. He watched me carefully, before drawing closer for me to pet him. I almost cried, knowing that I wasn't alone. "Hey boy, hey, how are you doing?" He sniffled my hand and looked at me as I patted him, noticing something. His nose was wet. No other part of him, just his snout. Had he been drinking something? It couldn't have been the ocean water. Maybe there was fresh water nearby. I looked up at the trees again, feeling excitement blossom in my chest. "Is there water, boy? Can you take me to the water?" I didn't know if Black understood, but he bounced around excitedly. I hoped it meant a yes. He trotted off down the beach, headed into the trees, and I followed him. It was so much darker past the tree line than I'd imagined. The jungle was thick, but quiet. The water wasn't far off, a little stream running through the trees. A part of me knew it might make me sick, but it was either sickness or death by dehydration. That wasn't much of a choice. Besides, isn't running water supposed to be the safest? I drank greedily. The water was silty and disgusting, but I drank it all the same, barely more dignified than Black as I lapped it up. It didn't matter. When I drank my fill and looked around, behind me I could hear the crashing ocean waves, and I had to take a moment to think about what I wanted to do next. I was armed and hydrated. The next logical choice was to look for food and shelter. I may have been a struggling model, but I wasn't an idiot. With Black in my sight, I went deeper inland, following the stream. The deeper I went, the darker it seemed to get. Sometimes I could have sworn I heard movements behind me, or off to the side, but Black never reacted, or anything. He was one of the calmest dogs I'd ever seen. He followed me patiently, stopping occasionally to drink from the stream. We didn't run into animals, and the hunger slowly got to me more and more. I almost considered killing Black for food, but the idea was too gruesome to consider for the time being. I knew that I might need to, but until I had no choice, I wasn't going to do it. As we went, the stream grew wider and wider, until it was a small set of rapids, no deeper than my ankle, or wider than my leg, but wide enough that if I ever got lost, I could hear it easily. I can't say how long I walked for, and I thought about stopping to rest countless times, but something spurred me on. The first signs of civilization I saw was a worn trail that started to appear by the stream. Up ahead of it, I saw carved stone pillars and a low bridge that went over the stream. I felt a stab of excitement, hoping that maybe there were people around. I felt a new burst of energy as I followed the path, which kept me close to the stream. As I walked down the path, I thought I saw a man up ahead. A jolt of excitement ran through me and gave me a second wind. "Hello?" My voice cracked in desperate. "Hello, can you help me? My boat went down." The man up ahead didn't move or react, and as I picked up the pace, my shoe caught in a root. I went down onto my face hard and quickly picked myself up. I started to call out again, but there was no one there. The trail ahead of me was empty. Black sat down at my side, panting calmly. I stared at where I thought I'd seen the person, but maybe I'd been wrong. When I got on the spot, there was no sign of anyone had been there at all. My strength failed me then. I sat down on the side of the trail and cried. Black sat patiently, waiting for me to finish. I thought about turning around and going back to the beach, but I didn't. I stood up and kept walking down the trail, hoping that next time I wouldn't be so unlucky. The trail grew wider, and I eventually noticed that there were structures in the jungle around me. Pale stone ruins were littered amongst the trees. Up ahead, I could even see a large set of stone stairs that looked like they were part of a pyramid. I couldn't see more through the trees, but it was a very educated guess. So this is where my trail led, to ruins. I suppose it was better than taking shelter in the jungle. I rested in one of the smaller structures that was close to the stream. It seemed deeper and wider here, almost like a river. I was able to drink a little more and examine the area around me. I've been to the Mayan ruins before, but these looked bigger and better maintained. I wondered just how many people had lived here long ago. I figured I had to explore later, when I'd rested. Maybe there'd be some sort of food source nearby, or at least an animal I could kill. The hunger was almost painful now. Looking up near the center of the ruins, where the pyramid was, I wondered if I could set a fire on top of it. The smoke would certainly draw attention, and maybe even rescue. I thought about it, before deciding it was a bad idea. Sometime after that, I slept. It was the drums that woke me up, slow and booming, building up some ominous tempo. Black sat quietly by the entrance to my hideaway, and I crawled along the stone floor until I was beside him. There were lights in the jungle that looked like distant fires. The drums were loud and growing closer. I thought about running but stayed put. Then the screams started. They sounded like screams of the most horrible agony a person could ever be in. I wanted to run, but I didn't. I stayed where I was, and where I thought I was safe. Through the trees, I could see movement. Dark figures drawing closer. Their faces were obscured by dark masks with twisted, screaming features. A man walked past my hideaway, no mask, but he held an instrument that looked like a skull in his hands. When he brought it to his lips, I heard that horrible scream again. Even though I knew it wasn't from a person, it still sent shivers down my spine. The figures drew towards the pyramids, a long, slow procession. They didn't notice me, they just marched. In the trees, I heard a low, slow chanting. I saw so many tiny points of firelight that they almost looked like stars. The procession neared the pyramids, and as they did, I realized that their formation had a purpose. The drummers surrounded what looked like guards, and those guards surrounded a man holding a statue of something. In the darkness, I couldn't tell just what it was. The chanting grew more complex and louder. I can't even begin to describe what they had been saying, but it sounded like a song. The man at the front of the procession reached the pyramid steps, and he sounded his death whistle once more. Countless similar screams came from the trees around me, making me flinch. Then came the gunshots. The drums grew louder, as if in warning. The guards behind them fanned out, and as they did, I saw them meet their enemies. Long ago, in another lifetime, I remember watching a documentary on the Spanish conquistadors. In the torchlight, the people who came to engage the guards looked similar. They wore the armor and fought viciously. The guards didn't stand much of a chance, and I covered my mouth to keep from screaming as the battle was fought and won. It was quick and bloody. Most of the possessions fled, save for the guards and the man with the statue. He didn't run towards combat. He ran towards the pyramid. He made it up several steps before a final gunshot sounded out, and he collapsed. He rolled down the stairs, dropping the statue as he did. Two of the conquistadors seized the man, while the third picked up the statue. "Captain Ruiz!" one of them called out. I saw a man step towards the others. This one wasn't armored, and dressed like he walked right out of the 1600s. He wore a red long coat, a matched white brimmed hat with a long feather in it. When he spoke to the wounded man that had been brought before him, he spoke in Spanish, but I couldn't understand what he said. The man who had taken the statue showed it to him, and Ruiz dismissed him with a wave of his hand.
Vámonos,
Ruiz said. His men started to leave as he took his pistol from his belt. I watched as he shot the captive man in the head, and I barely stiffed my scream. I don't think they would have hit me, but that was the moment Black decided to react. He'd been quiet up until that moment, silently watching the scene unfold alongside me, but now he started barking aggressively and ran from his hiding spot. He didn't attack Ruiz, simply barked at him. Ruiz recoiled back a step, staring down at Black in shock. His men quickly put as much distance between the dog and themselves as they could and watched him. Black stood defiantly before Ruiz, watching as he slowly replaced the gun in his belt. Then he looked up at me. He spoke and pointed at me. The soldiers who brought in the man he executed started towards me. I got up and ran, but I was weak, tired and slow. I didn't get far before they grabbed me, kicking and screaming to Ruiz. He studied me quietly in the darkness, and for a moment I half expected him to take out another gun or reload the one he had, but he didn't. He spoke calmly to one of the men and then turned away. We walked quietly through the jungle, Ruiz always in front of me, and his man always behind. I was too afraid to run, and too weak to try. I thought about the gun and the knife I carried on my person, and I waited for them to pat me down or check, but they didn't. Kevin's shirt covered them up, and I wondered if maybe they just didn't think I'd be armed. Even if I pulled them, I wasn't sure I could fight all of these people, or if they even meant me harm. They hadn't killed me yet. That was a good sign. Black had run ahead, stopping briefly to look back at me. The soldiers seemed to watch him carefully and just avoided him. I don't know how long we walked for, but eventually I saw torches through the jungle. The Spaniards had set up their tents in a small clearing, and I was led the largest one, in the center of the encampment. Ruiz stepped inside, and then looked at me. He spoke to his men. One of them nudged me to go inside. I didn't argue. What awaited me inside the tent made my mouth water. It made me remember my hunger. Ruiz undid his pistol bell and hung it up before taking a seat at a small table at the center of the room. There was roast meat that smelled better than anything else I'd ever tasted and fresh fruit. I stood near the entrance of the tent, unsure what to do. Ruiz gestured to a chair across of him, and I hesitantly took it. He spoke to me in Spanish, no doubt asking me some sort of question, but I didn't understand. When I didn't respond, he frowned, then tried again.
Do you want some wine?
His English carried a heavy accent and wasn't perfect, but I could understand it. Yes, please,
Ah, a common tongue.
Ruiz said. His voice came across as warm.
I am sorry you needed to see such a display of violence, but it was necessary. Those people had taken something of ours. We needed it back.
He offered me a glass of wine, then gestured to the food.
Eat. I can't imagine you've had anything since you've arrived here.
I didn't need a second invitation to judge myself, and that's exactly what I did. The meat was succulent, the fruit juicy. I never eaten anything that delicious before. Ruiz picked at his food, displaying far better manners than I was.
If you don't mind me asking, where is it you come from?
He asked.
Your clothes are, unusual?
I was in a boat that went down just offshore. I said, pausing in my feast. We were hit by a storm that came out of nowhere.
I see. We don't get many visitors here. I suppose that's what fashion in the world outside looks like these days.
No, really, no, I admitted. One of the guys on the ship was wearing it. I found him on the beach this morning. Ruiz nodded slowly.
A last survivor. I am sorry for your losses. The weather here can be a little unpredictable. Most seem to avoid the storms, but we have the unlucky few. It has been a few years since we've had anyone from the outside here, however.
How long have you been here? I asked. He smiled. It was sad, a lonely smile.
I suppose that's the inevitable question,
He said.
The world is quite different than it was when I came here. By my last count, it has been, maybe 300 years. Longer than I'd ever expected to live by far.
You've been here for 300 years? I froze up and Ruiz nodded.
It's not where I'd hoped to end up.
He replied.
It's alright if you have trouble believing me. My story isn't one to be easily believed. But I'm being rude here. I've never even asked your name. You are...
My name is Anna. Anna McAllister.
A pleasure to meet you, señorita. I am Alejandro Ruiz, former captain in the service of His Majesty King Felipe IV. Although, I suppose King Felipe is long gone.
I didn't know how to answer any of that, and watched as Ruiz plucked a grape from the vine and popped it in his mouth. Up close, and in the candlelight, I could see he was young. He couldn't been any day over 30. His black hair was long and spilled over his shoulders, and his skin looked incredibly pale. "What are you doing here?" I finally asked.
Originally, we were explorers. We'd heard tales in the mainland of a reclusive people here. My superior believed there was something to be found and, well, I was sent to investigate. What was it he believed in? A river filled with precious gems. Reach to the bottom and you could pluck out sapphires like common stones. I'm sure you've seen the stream, see?
I nodded, and Ruiz smiled.
Then you know that is a lie. There's very little here that's remarkable. I'm not sure where my superior got his information, but there is no wealth to be found here. Maybe someone lied to him deliberately, knowing what was really here, and hoped he'd blindly go running. If so, he's a smarter man than I always gave him credit for.
Ruiz's eyes met mine.
In the beginning, God created all things. You know this to be true, right?
Yes, I said, nodding.
Wrong.
Ruiz replied.
God created many things, but he did not create this place. Someone else did that. When we got here, we met the people of the city inland. I called this place Isla de Ruiz, my island. But that is not its true name. From what we gathered from the people here, the rough translation into my tongue is La Muerte del Cielo. I think heaven's death in English. You see, they were not reclusive, like the people of the mainland thought. No, they were bound here, bound to this soil, these trees.
Bound by what? I asked. Ruiz looked at me, and then at the food in front of me.
Eat, and I will show you.
We finished our meal in silence, and after we did, he rose from his seat and led me out of the tent. Through the quiet camp, a rocky crevice sat near the edge of the camp, and Ruiz went in first. I followed him, tentatively. Inside, the darkness seemed so total that I almost wondered if I was dead. There was no light, no sound, nothing. At last, I saw light ahead of me. Ruiz and I stepped into the dimly lit chamber, and in the center, I could see what I recognized as a statue that the man at the pyramids had been holding. Up close, it was hard to look at directly. The shape seemed difficult to pinpoint, or even describe. It was as if it was changing, moving. Looking at it made me feel sick, and filled me with a deep feeling of uneasiness. What is that thing? I asked.
That is what made this place.
Ruiz said calmly.
That is why there are no animals, yet we still eat. That is why we do not die.
He shook his head.
Once we had a man with us, a pastor, Father Rodriguez. He was a good man, but foolish. He thought he could turn them from their pagan faith to the light of God. He thought if he took this idol, then he could show them that this unnatural deity was false. He was wrong. When he brought it back to our encampment, a roar came from the forest that shook us to our bones. Soon after, something emerged from the depths of the island, where even we do not go. The ruins we found you in were only part of the original village. The rest were destroyed over the course of a night. I don't know where the survivors live. We only rarely see them. I can't imagine there are many left alive. Father Rodriguez succeeded in his goal to turn them away from their pagan god. But he only made them want revenge against it. I suppose they think that by destroying this idol, they'll be able to kill it, and either free or avenge themselves. Maybe they will. Or maybe they'll just anger it again and kill us all. That is something I will not risk.
He looked at me once more.
When they took it this morning, we needed to get it back. Whatever rules this island, it is our god now. I think that is why it keeps all of us alive. Because it wants us to worship it.
I saw a half look at that horrible, shapeless idol once more. Ruiz turned away from it and started towards the passageway back to the village.
We are cursed, Anna. All of us. That's what this island does to people.
He disappeared through the passageway, and I followed him. I slept in Ruiz's tent that night. He had a bed prepared for me. And in the morning I had breakfast with him. There wasn't much aside from fruit. I was almost afraid to ask if there was a chance of me escaping. I didn't know what his answer would be, but I dreaded finding out. I was just like him, a subject of whatever entity held sway over this place. Outside the tent, I could hear movements of troops.
Don't worry yourself with them,
Ruiz said calmly. He noticed my interest.
They're getting ready for our morning worship. There's no need to concern yourself.
Aren't you going to join them? I asked.
In time,
He replied.
But after it is set up.
I nodded and studied a pear in my hand. It looked ripe, and I knew that if I bit into it, it would be delicious. Where does all the food come from? I finally asked.
If only I could tell you.
Ruiz replied.
Our stores replenish daily, as if they were untouched the day before. We have no explanation for that, other than it is the work of the thing that keeps us here.
Have you ever seen it? I asked. Ruiz took a bite out of an apple, chewing noisily before swallowing.
I have? But I would not ask me to describe it if I were you. You've seen the idol, or shall I say, tried to see it. I don't believe that thing has any definite shape. At times, I see it in a form it chooses, but then it wants to be seen. Some of my men think of it as a shapeshifter. It is not untrue, but likewise, it is not truly accurate either.
What do you think of it as? I asked.
Something we are not capable of understanding.
He replied before standing up.
If you'll excuse me, I must go and oversee the final preparations for the worship. I'll have someone collect you when all is ready.
He gave me a slight bow before stepping out and leaving me alone in his tent. It wasn't alone for long though. A familiar head peeked through the door to the tent and Black padded inside, happy and healthy. He laid down at my feet and I reached down to pat him. "You know you're lucky they're friendly," I said to him. "Or I'd be very mad at you right now." Black looked up at me, licking his chops, and I wondered if he'd eaten it all. I let him have some of the fruit. As I waited in Rui's tent, I began to finally gather the questions I'd have for him when he returned. I wanted to know if there was a way off this island, or if I was stuck there like he was, bound by whatever entity controlled this place. I snacked on the fruits and enjoyed the first chance I had since I washed ashore to rest, without fear of dying. It wasn't long before one of the men arrived to get me. He didn't speak, just gestured for me to follow. Black got up and padded alongside us. In the dim daylight, I could see how pale all of the Spanish soldiers were. Their old armor was rusted and worn. It looked several hundred years old, even if they didn't. The torches still burned near the tents to offset the darkness of the jungle canopy ahead. Now that I got a good look at it, the camp was smaller than I'd imagined. Ruiz clearly had more luxuries than his men weren't afforded. I could see some of the meat roasting over an open fire, and several smaller tents. A second largest had to be the barracks. The tents had been modified with foliage and over parts of the jungle, no doubt to keep them sturdy. It was clear that these people were making the best of the situation. Aside of my escorts though, it was mostly empty. I was led silently out of the camp and towards the well-trodden jungle path. We must have walked for a good half an hour or so until up ahead I saw a small clearing with a waterfall. Ruiz and many of the men waited at the base of it. Ruiz himself stood on a rock in the front of the waterfall. As I got closer, I saw a great sinking hole behind him that the waterfall fell into. I was led directly towards Ruiz and stopped at the base of his rock. Black sat down beside me, waiting patiently. Ruiz began to speak in Spanish to the assembled men. Whatever he was saying was something passionate and desperate. Another man beside him had the shifting icon of the terrible god that ruled this place. I looked away from it. As he continued to speak, I stole a glance down the sinking hole. It was so impossibly deep, and I could barely see the pool of water at the bottom. Yet, the sunlight was brighter here, on account of weaker tree canopy. At the bottom of that sinkhole, I saw something glimmering. Looking down, my eyes widened a little. It was armor, not unlike the men around me wore. Not just one set. There were countless sets there. It took me a moment to realize what I was seeing. My heart began to race as I started to listen to what Ruiz was saying. I didn't need to know Spanish to pick out a few choice words. Sacrificio, humano, human sacrifice. Of course, they must not have thought I suspected a thing, because I wasn't well guarded. Ruiz had told me nothing about sacrifice. The gun and the knife I kept on were still there, untouched, and all eyes were on Ruiz. Had he been that careless? Both were hidden under my shirt, but he and his men still hadn't even checked. Black stood up, and Ruiz stopped abruptly to look at him. The other man did too, and watched as he padded over to Ruiz. All eyes were on him. Ruiz shakily continued to speak. He watched as Black slowly made his way around the sinkhole. behind the waterfall. Now, even I was transfixed. I had no idea what was going on, but there was a significance in all of this. Some grand practical joke I didn't yet understand. But I knew the punchline was coming. As Black passed behind the waterfall, I could see a shape behind the falling water. Not the shape of a dog. Not exactly. It seemed to rise and twist unnaturally behind the veil of water. And I, for just a moment, saw it. Behind the falling water, something moved. Something that was not natural. And it sure as hell wasn't a dog. The man had gone silent, looking at Black as he emerged from the other side of the waterfall and sat down, panting like a dog would. I could feel him looking at me. Had they always known, or just suspected? Ruiz stared at Black for the longest time before looking at the man beside me. He gave him a hasty nod, and I heard one of the men beside me pull a knife. Black watched patiently. This was it. I went for the gun, and I shot 2 rounds into the face of the soldier beside me. He dropped the knife and collapsed backwards. I never fired a gun in my life before, but at that range, I couldn't miss. Some of the other men panicked. I saw Ruiz stare at me in shock, and I aimed the gun at him. I almost fired, but then I saw the man holding the idol beside him. I used my shots on him instead. I think I fired about 5. I don't know how many hit, or how many missed. The man jerked backwards. The shifting idol fell from his hands and rolled towards the sinkhole. I saw several of the men scrambling to recover it, and I didn't stick around to see if they did. I ran. I fired off 2 shots into the air, hoping I might dissuade the Spanish soldiers from following me into the jungle. My one advantage was that I wasn't wearing heavy armor like they were, and that made me faster. I didn't know where I was going, or where I could run to. I just wanted to get away. Branches whipped past me, and I could hear the shouts from men behind me. I can only imagine some of them were chasing me. I must have circled back to the trail that they'd initially gone down, because I burst out onto a trail. I kept running towards the camp. The distant voices grew faster and fainter, and as they did, I heard a sound that made every nerve in my body alive with pain. It was almost a roar, but infinitely louder and more bestial. A sound of something ancient and angry. The island itself shook, but I didn't stop running until I saw the camp. I didn't stay long, just long enough to grab a torch and set Ruiz's tent on fire. Once the fire caught, I tossed the torch towards the barrack's tent and kept running. I hoped it would serve as enough of a distraction to keep the soldiers off my back. I ran off into the jungle, avoiding the trail this time. It would be too easy to catch me on the trail. I was better off that way from it. I kept going straight, until ahead of me I heard a trickle of water. I only momentarily stopped when I saw the stream trickling past me. It was a heading, and I went to follow it. I didn't recognize my surroundings, but I kept running for as long as I could. The silence of the jungle felt horribly ominous as I escaped the soldiers, but after running what felt like forever, I heard distant ocean waves lapping at the shore. I burst out onto the beach, panting and worn out. The gun still rested in my hand, and I almost collapsed on the spot. My lungs burned, demanding air for the first time since I lit the encampment on fire. I stopped to rest.
Anna!
The voice behind me made me spin around and raise my gun. Ruiz stepped out of the jungle, his own pistol raised.
When did the outside world start allowing women to have guns? I wonder.
He said softly.
I should have been sure to check. And I've paid dearly for that mistake.
If you take another step closer, you will pay even more, I warned. Ruiz smiled sadly at me. In the bright sunlight, he looked almost like a ghost.
Would I?
He asked and lowered his gun.
Shoot me if you like, but you...
I didn't hesitate. I shot him twice, and Ruiz went down immediately. Panting, I glanced back up towards the trail, then up towards the sky. Even from where I stood, I could see the black smoke from the Spanish encampment rising into the sky.
I am sorry, Anna.
Ruiz's voice fell like a step of pure fear as he stood up. There was no sign of injury, no evidence I've ever shot him.
Would it have been easier if I told you what would happen? Those who wash up here take better to the kinder treatment of a last meal and pleasant company, as opposed to knowing what will happen.
Why kill them? I asked.
It is either them or us. And it has been us too many times.
Ruiz replied.
That is what the other people did to stave off the wrath of the creature. That is the price for having its idol. It needs to feed. It needs worship. It needs sacrifice.
I should have shot that idol, I said softly. If it would stop this, I should have shot it.
You think we never considered it?
Ruiz asked.
We don't even know what it is. We don't know what it will do. All we can do is placate it. Besides, death is a mercy, Anna. The alternative would be to stay here, undying like us, cut off from the world, from our homes, from our families.
He took a step towards me.
Once I had a wife, a beautiful wife. Once I had a daughter. For so long I wished I could return to them, but the world has left us behind. My family is long dead. There is no escape from this place. A merciful death is preferable to a long, cruel life.
I didn't raise the gun to him again. Ruiz offered me a hand.
Accept this for what it is, Anna. Mercy.
For a moment, I almost reached out to take his hand. But I saw Ruiz's face change as he looked at something behind me. A boat on the horizon. They must have seen the smoke. Ruiz stared at it for the longest time. I looked back at him. His brow furrowed as he stared at it. But then he sighed, his smile returning. He lowered his hand, but didn't reach for his gun. My finger gripped the trigger, and I felt the ground beneath my feet tremble. Ruiz looked back towards the jungle, staring into the darkness. I took the opportunity to run. I ran for the shadows, and waded deeper and deeper into the water, forcing myself to head towards the boat. I could see a smaller dinghy, like the one I'd arrived in, come towards me, and when I felt my hands pulling me out of the water, it didn't feel real. As I was pulled into the dinghy, I allowed myself one last look at the island. Ruiz was gone, but in his place, sitting patiently outside the tree line, was black.